Hello and happy Metta Monday. This is a short video created to connect you with your most authentic self. And today I'm talking about the possibility that we have for rewiring the mind. And I'm working my way through editing the chapters on the healing map that I shared a few weeks ago, and working through the layers of the healing map. So just a very brief reminder, the healing map is made up with our authentic self at the center, and then just close to that self, our highest and brightest self, is where the wounding lives. Anything that wasn't resolved in the moment that it happened, whether it was early in our childhood or quite recently, that's just energy that needs to be tended to, understood, and released through all the layers of body, mind, and spirit. And so working from that center of the self and the wound layer is the imprint on the body, and this can be in a dysregulated nervous system, this can be stuck energy in the body, in the organs or the fascia. And then further out are the bodily held core beliefs, so the things that we believe to be true about ourselves, good or bad. But on the healing map, this is the negative core beliefs. And then further out are the patterns of the mind. And the patterns of the mind are just a symptom of these deeper layers. But they're more of the manifestation that we can get access to by observing our thoughts. And then the outer layer are our behaviors and our choices that we make. And so this is the even more obvious thing of, if I'm doing something that I know is self-destructive, this is an example of a behavior pattern that probably reflects a thought pattern that is a reflection of a deeper core belief, which is created by some wounding moment. And so, my, chapters about the healing map talk about working from the outside inward to the more tender stuff, and the closer you get to the actual wound, of course, is when you want to bring them in a therapist. Ideally, I talk about a body-informed therapist, and I list lots of options that I've either experienced myself or been doing a lot of research on. And so there are a lot of options that I'm passionate about sharing. But so the mind, the rewiring of the mind was the piece that I was really interested about in talking about today. And it is possible to witness your thoughts in real time and eventually change them. So, we rewire by first noticing the way that we're wired. So rewiring the mind is basically, noticing what negative and unhelpful patterns of thought we have, and then beginning to change them and replace them. And so this is done through, practicing mindfulness throughout your day of just observing and witnessing your thoughts as you think them. Also meditation, and this is an opportunity to really sit with what the mind is doing and watching it without judgment. Just get curious, get like a scientist, and bring in compassion if it's uncomfortable. I talk a lot about compassion. And the next piece is to replace whatever patterns of the mind, whatever inner judgments there are, with more helpful things. So for me, I'll share a personal example. I was, in my 30s, and, I was coming back into some anxiety and depression, and realized that I needed to change something. And I was fortunate to be in, a yoga class, like a regular yoga class, where they brought in a lot of mindfulness cues of, notice the body and the mind, notice what the thoughts and the thought patterns are. And so I just began to track inwardly, what was going on in there. And the first thing I noticed was that I was judging others, intensely. And I realized that if I was judging others, what was I doing towards myself? And so the more closely that I paid attention, the more that I realized that, even deeper than any judgments I was casting outward were the ones that I was, inflicting on myself. And so I just began to study it more deeply. And this was a really informal practice for me. I didn't know what I was doing. This was, almost 10 years ago, I think. And it was just, kind of this realization that came over me of, wow, I have like a Taj Mahal made up of negative thoughts, like this mausoleum, like this beautiful constructed, tower devoted to negative thinking. It was very well constructed and intricate and just robust. And then of the positive beliefs and thinking and patterns that I had, I could fit them all in like a tiny little like matchbox. And so my work was to transform. I knew this even back then. My work was to take a negative thought and think of it as like raw material. And I, took each negative thought that I noticed and I transformed it into something more supportive, so I'm never on time, and this is actually still true of me, but no, I just think it's funny. But if I were to, if I was never on time, there would be this judgment of, some inner judgment, a value judgment of you're never on time and therefore you are less worthy, you suck, or whatever the thought was, it was judgmental. And, I learned to flip these thoughts towards the positive of like, it's kind of endearing you're never on time. You are squeezing like the most out of like any moment and minute. And then, there were also, blocks to me being on time that I was able to study in a more neutral way. But the first thing I did was flip a judgment into either something positive or at least a point of neutral curiosity, so that I could build a more helpful belief structure and pattern of thoughts. And so just that image of like taking the structure of, your negative thought patterns and using them as raw material. We're not like throwing anything away. We're transforming it and bringing it into something that is more of service to us. That's the rewiring. And, part of this, I was really fortunate over the weekend to connect with an amazing yoga teacher, Raghunath, who is able to like bring yoga philosophy into like daily life. He has a podcast I'll link you to in the comments. It's amazing. And he talked about how those negative thought patterns are like a mantra. And, a mantra in yoga is usually something supportive and, devoted to the highest and best in our lives. And it's like calling back to the mind and the heart, something beautiful, like a beautiful mantra I like to use is so hum. Like I am that I am you, you are me. And it reminds me of, that unification. But in, from his perspective, he was saying, the mantra that I was saying of like I suck, right? That's also a mantra. And we all have some really crappy mantras like hardwired in, at least a few, unless we had 100% perfect, childhoods and life experiences leading up to this moment, which would make us not human. We all have a couple of these unhelpful mantras floating around. So his phrase that really stuck with me was replace your mantra. Just replace your mantra. And the process that I explained of like using the negative thought as raw material, transforming it into something more useful, then you're replacing that mantra. And it's not that easy, right? It's not just, I suck turns into I am amazing. Because if parts of you don't believe that, you're going to hit resistance. You're not going to be able to take those words in. So that's why positive affirmations on their own don't work. They don't. What you need to do is study your resistance. So this is the interesting thing, right? You don't speed up and just, roll over the speed bump of your resistance. You slow down and study what your resistance is made up of. What beliefs are within you that don't agree with the positive core belief of, for example, I am wonderful, right? What is that resistance? What does it say? What are its words? And get really, interested in what your inner workings are made up of, because that's how you rewire. There's no shortcut to this. This is work. And, journaling is also a really useful tool. But, this process of self-study, we can do this in therapy, but we can also do this on our own meditation cushion, with a journal, with a friend who is, non-judgmental and can be compassionate with you. But most of this work can be done, in your own personal laboratory of your meditation cushion and just your mindfulness practice, in day-to-day life. So there's also a process of future self journaling that the holistic psychologist does that I will be mentioning in my book as well, that is amazing. And it's this whole patterning of process of repatterning behaviors, thoughts, and bringing in a new affirmation. And I have another video on that I did over the summer, so take a look. But I'm already at 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop. I hope you guys have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening. I'm clearly a little bit passionate about these topics, and I can't wait to share them in my book. I believe my book will be ready by April or May, so stay tuned and have a beautiful, skillful day.